Well, here we are. I mean, if we were going to do a series where we're reading booktubers, especially fantasy booktubers' favourite books, there was an inevitability to this. Today we will be reading Daniel Greene's Green Daniels, The Goblin, his favourite books. Not necessarily his favourite books, but the answers to the prompts that I have given. But I mean, for a man so young, he has a lot of children, metaphorically speaking. I can't speak physically, I don't know the man, but at least metaphorically, he has a lot of children that he has cultivated in this space. And I, for one, have been suckling at his teat for quite a while now. And so yeah, there's an interesting dynamic in the sense of the first time I ever had an interaction with Daniel Greene was being told that he'd break my legs if I didn't do something. The next time was he reviewed my bookshelf that I put a lot of time and effort into, and he only had positive things to say.
Hey Ben, I can see here, like most of the comedy on your YouTube channel,
It's very good. And now we've ended up here. I reached out to Daniel and asked for 3 specific books. And I took a guess of what I thought, being such a big fan, what he would answer the questions with. And I want you to play along. I want you to sit at home and see whether you were just as wrong as me. Well, it's this Daniel Greene style cut-in interlude to let you know that you should like and subscribe. Am I right? Look, I got a haircut. This is after the video. I am editing. This is like Daniel Greene. So, first prompt. Favourite book / series? You're all shouting at the screen. Well, I don't know if you've heard of this series called The Wheel of Time. That was my guess. I was wrong, evidently. In fact, the answer he provided was... I know what you're thinking. Murderbot. I know he loves Murderbot. I mean, like I've seen him talk about it. I didn't expect it to be the choice for best book / series. So right off the bat, he's thrown me for a loop. I've lost my membership. I've dropped my Daniel Greene membership card, and I feel a fool. A foolish fool. But looking at it, super excited. You'll notice as we go along, my man knew the assignment. He could have chosen Wheel of Time. He could have chosen very long books. My man chose a novella. That's the kind of move we like to see. Murderbot likes humans. They love watching all the TV. They love kind of viewing humanity. When it comes to humanity interacting with them, not so much. So we're following an anxious-ass robot, and I think I can see why Daniel Greene enjoys it. For those that suffer with anxiety, there's something kind of funny about being like, this sentient piece of machinery understands how I feel perfectly. Which is a great introduction to both the humans and Murderbot themselves, because the humans are in polyamorous relationships. We have multiple partners, we have all different types of sexualities, and just different types of people explored. And I really liked the lack of borders in this, that the author was just whatever they wanted to do, whoever they wanted to be in it, how they wanted people to be perceived, they just did it. And I really appreciated that. And so what happens is, during this mission, Murderbot, there seems like there's a little bit of an issue. There is an issue of hacking happening, that there could be a sabotage affecting this team, and that they have to basically investigate and find out what's happening and who is responsible. It's a novella, so it's a very short cut, straight in, straight out. Wonderful job at building the character. Murderbot feels fully realised. I completely related to them. I completely related to their anxiety, their otherness, their reluctance to infiltrate society. There's a wonderful part in this where it's described the idea of Murderbot is worried, so they're acting awkwardly, which is making the humans act awkwardly, which is making Murderbot act more awkwardly, which is just perpetuating the issue. And there's moments like that where you can't help but read it and be like, go God, I've been there. Because it's a novella, I don't want to give too much away. Very funny, super just accessible writing. I enjoyed the prose way more than I was anticipating. I thought it could be a little cringy going in terms of the premise. I had a bit of hesitancy, but it turned out to be a banger. I gave it 4 stars, and I think this will be a series that is a sum of its parts rather than an individual base-by-base perfection. I think it's one of those ones that you'll read, and looking back on it, it will create this 5-star atmosphere. 4 spanks out of 5. Was that 4? I don't know. And moving on from there, I then asked Daniel, what is a book that you believe deserves more attention? This was the only one out of the 3 I got correct. Take a guess. What's the book that you believe that Daniel believes deserves more attention? With me being about 50 pages in, I gave the first 2 chapters a read just to see how what's going on. So this won't be the full review, but I'll give an idea before I read the whole thing. This is an Indo-Persian fantasy with what also feels like Roman, like as in Greek mythology that's become Roman. It feels very Roman in a way. Influences. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but that's how it feels. Indo-Persian and Roman. And so we have 2 main characters. We've got Keva and Micah. Keva, he is kind of an ex-hero. He's this ex-legend, famous for killing a magus. And now, as an older man with a daughter, he's been called back in, and he is having to deal with another problem. I get kind of Kratos vibes in the sense of the new game where he's a bit older, a bit grizzled, he's a bit like, oh god, I kind of just want to chill, but is called back into action. And then the other side, we have Micah. Micah is a religious zealot on a way to destroy the nation that Kevar lives in. He is fueled by anger, making mad decisions straight off the bat. So when I finish, you will hear, I'll be back in about 3 seconds for you to tell you what I thought about Gunmetal Gods. Gunmetal Gods by Zamil Akhtar has a lot going for it. I am going to be 100% honest in the fact that I have complete mixed thoughts. I gave this 2.5 stars because there are certain things that I very much enjoyed, certain things that I was on board with, and there were certain things that made me want to put the book down and never read it again. This is not a 2.5 stars in, oh, I don't have many thoughts or many feelings. This is a 3-star, what the fuck have I just read review. So we're going to do the positives first. The kind of the mystical versus technology between the two, the opposing sides, was fascinating. There is a sense of the plot, as I've said before, is that Micah, he's described on the back as him and his 50,000 gun-toting paladins march, baptised in angel blood, thirsty to burn unbelievers. And that is very much the case. So Micah has come across and he's invading the land where our other main character, Kevar, lives. And Micah, of course, because he's the gun-toting paladins, is a much more technology-based combatant. Whereas Kevar and all of them, they are described as there are a group called the Zabadar, which they ride horses and they fire arrows, etc. And so when these two meet and fight, there is a real sense of, we need to get some fucking guns. And I loved that. There was a moment where Kevar's like, what the fuck are you all doing? Stop making swords and start building goddamn guns. Yeah, the two cultures and the kind of the collusion and the way they draw on each other and abuse each other, what they're taking from each other. It was fascinating, that aspect. Another great point is the narrative framing. I think I mentioned this before, but the narrative framing of having 2 main characters, both on opposing sides of a conflict, and telling both of their stories in first person was super interesting and something that I have not seen before, have not read myself personally. I don't know whether it's been popular before, whether people have done it, but for me it felt extremely refreshing and felt like something that I was glad to read it for that experience, in terms of introducing a new idea to like how to frame a narrative, how to connect to different characters. This is called Gunmetal Gods. So one big thing is that the mythology and the worship and the religion is key. It's not like they're worshipping gods that don't appear or don't exist. The gods and their manifestations and all of this is key and influenced and moving pieces on a board. There's a lot of political vying that's interesting. So along those lines, it's great. The prose, there are some cringy elements for me in terms of I didn't get along with the humour. I very rarely laughed, if any, and the prose could use a bit of polishing up. But on the whole, for an indie published book as well, I found myself engaged by the prose, and especially with it being first person. I'm not usually a first person kind of reader, so it was fighting an uphill battle to begin with, and I found myself adjusted to the first person extremely quickly because of the narrative framing being interesting. My final positive would be there are some genuine, very interesting reveals and twists that happened in the latter half of the book that really almost drew me back in. It didn't fully. By that point, I think the book had already done enough to pull me off. That's weird. That was odd phrasing. To pull me out. But it did. It made a last clawing effort to snatch my shirt. The creature works fantastic. Very eldritch and Lovecraftian monsters. Overall, positives wise, strong. I imagine you're thinking, well, what's the problem? Pacing. I was bored for big chunks of this book, I have to admit. People describe this as fast-paced. Every review I've seen is this is such a fast-paced, hard-hitting book. It does not relent. And it does. It's fast-paced when it wants to be fast-paced. And the moment the author kind of gets bored and doesn't want to tell a scene, or you could tell there's just not real interest, the pace slows to an absolute fucking stop. And you're just waiting for the scene to end. And then the scene does end completely abruptly because he got bored, and you fly straight back in. And it's like this whiplash of pacing between relentless and non-existent. And I found myself putting the book down and being like, I don't want to pick this up, because I put it down at a boring part. And then you pick it back up and you read 2 pages and you're like, this is still boring. Oh, fuck. And now the pace is gone. And so pacing is a big issue for me. I also found that I was never really connected to the main characters. And I know this is very much a grimdark book. I'm going to talk about a particular scene that illustrates it being a very grimdark book. But this isn't a grimdark book that I personally can get along with, where the characters are, if they're not good people, they're at least interesting. I thoroughly despised both our main characters. They're both bad people. Both sides have negatives. There's clearly a way worse side. And I hated that dude because he felt messy as a person, which I know was the point, but I hated him. And then the other character, there's an age gap play in this book. I fucking despise that trope. It's the worst for me. Just because your character has magically been made to look younger doesn't make me forgive them for fucking people that are that look their age. That's still a 50-year-old man fucking an 18-year-old or something. I hate it. I fucking despise it. I hate the overuse. It doesn't happen explicitly, but there's a weird. Evidently, it looks like it's going to happen. Like it's something that's going to be drawn on later. But I hated it. I did not like that story element. So that's that. And then my final thing is there is a scene halfway through this book. I've spoken to a couple of other people like Andrew and Pete, who have both read this book as well, and they both described how there is a scene halfway through this book that made them not want to pick up the book again. And so I will say that there is a content warning for rape in this book, and there is a content warning for incest in this book. Now, some people may see that as spoilers. I would see it as there is a very explicit scene in this book that was repulsive to me. It's one of those scenes that is justified in text, that you look back on it and you're like, oh, they've explained how this happened. I understand, blah, 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 blah. I understand why it's being done. It does not change that it is repulsive to read, and it sets up a precedent that if you do find it as physically off-putting, as I believe a lot of people will, you lose the trust in the author that will not happen again, because it's happened. And now you're like, that opens the door to all kinds of things that I do not want to read happening, and that's something that I think that's a individual reader's choice. Everyone has their limits. Everyone has what they can justify. Personally, I found it repulsive. I put it in chat, and people were like, "Yeah, this was fucked up." What an experience! As an overall, if you are interested in this, not based on the hype, because I think that the hype will let in a lot of people that are not ready for it. You need to go in being very prepared that this is grimdark and horrid. These are not good characters. These are awful people. This is not an Abercrombie where you're going to have characters do horrific things, but there's humour to undermine it. There's satire or something. This is horrid people doing horrid things. There's not a malice element where you've got people doing horrible things, but there is a sense of real feeling and heart behind their motives. Personally, for me, I found this doing horrid things for horrid reasons. And there is an audience for that, evidently. There are people that love this book. There are people that I really like their reviews. I really respect their opinion, that love this book. I have nothing against someone who reads this book and enjoys it, because there is a story here to enjoy. It's not for me. And that's just the case. And then finally, when I asked, what is a book that you love that you don't think people will know that you love? I guessed Sherlock Holmes, because anyone that's watched Daniel Greene for a while knows that he loves Sherlock Holmes. He's talked about Sherlock Holmes a lot. And so I anticipated that, because he hasn't talked about Sherlock Holmes in a while, it feels like. And so I thought that for newer audiences, that may be one that crops up. They're like, oh, shit. And so that was my guess. I was horrifically wrong. Instead, it's Flowers for Algernon, which is also a book that I've been really wanting to read. So I'm so glad to have picked it up and be able to give this a read. For anyone that doesn't know, this is heralded as a masterpiece in science fiction. And the description, I'm just going to read the back. I have not started this one. Charlie Gordon, IQ 68, is a floor sweeper and the gentle butt of everyone's jokes, until an experiment in the enhancement of human intelligence turns him into a genius. But then Algernon, the mouse whose triumphal experimental transformation preceded his, fades and dies, and Charlie has to face the possibility that his salvation was only temporary. That sounds harrowing. This feels like it's definitely going to go into the mortality of man. I've heard that it's extremely dark. I feel like that's something I've definitely heard. You'll notice once again, short book. Mad props to you, Daniel. The most I knew about Flowers for Algernon going in is that they made an Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode based on it, which is Flowers for Charlie, which is a fantastic episode, absolutely ridiculous.
A simple pill ingested by a man who received a simple idea, a simple thought, so clear and sharp that it cut through his mind like a soft cheese and led him to an invention.
So here we are, last book. We have been on a journey together, and we are ending on an absolute high note. The best book out of the three, by a mile, Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes, is phenomenal. This is, without a doubt, one of the most impressive technically written books I've ever read. So I'm going to go into some parts just to give an idea of what I took away as the most phenomenal thing that I read in the book. And so that would be the exploration of the ascendancy of intelligence. So as we're following Charlie, who has been put into this experiment where they're going to do an operation which will increase his intelligence. We are reading diary entries, basically. They're called progress reports. And it is him documenting how he feels, what's happening in his day. And they start before the experiment takes place. And as a result, we have misspellings, we have no punctuation, no grammar. It's just straight text that because you know what the word should be, it's like that classic test of like, if you can read this, then blah, blah, blah. Your brain will automatically reassemble the parts and make it into a functional sentence, so that it's not uncomfortable to read that beginning. And so as he slowly develops, he begins to slowly have certain words be spelled correctly, and then it builds on that, and you have sentences start to be completely correct, and then you have the introduction of grammar. He learns punctuation. There's a really interesting dynamic between him learning what punctuation is versus how to actually use it. All of this wonderful work at the beginning, growing this character, and you feel the sympathy with them as they grow. One of the most phenomenal things was the introduction of metaphors, that as Charlie begins to become more conscious and more, he can grapple concepts better, he's able to use imagery and symbolism, and he's able to introduce that into his writing. There's the concept of anxiety, being worried that you now are aware someone's reading your progress reports. How does that make you feel? What are you going to leave out? What are you going to put in? All of this is done consciously and is ever growing as the story takes place. And I thought it was the most phenomenal narrative device I have ever experienced. And it made Charlie so much more relatable, and you wanted the best for him, and you felt for him. It's what connected you to the character, because at the same time that he's developing intelligence, he's also learning to grapple with his past. He's learning to understand the emotions that he's felt, the trauma that he's been through. He's remembering things. He's starting to put together different concepts that never made sense to him before. And it's like this parallelism between the written intelligence and the emotional intelligence, what's developing. It was brilliant. I cannot speak enough about how the writing was incredible in this. My main negative of this book is that because it is written in 1959, I believe, and it's dealing with psychology and it's dealing with people with learning difficulties, as a result, some of the views, some of the terminology definitely is antiquated. It's using the R word, and it's using it as a medical term. It's using a lot of different terminologies that we don't use anymore. But more than that, it's using a lot of archetypes, especially around women. It uses the archetypes of the mother, the angel, and the whore. That whole thing that existed in that period of time. This book definitely hits that. Every single one of those three is explored and is there. And whilst I think it does a good job at it, it doesn't change that if you're aware and you're looking for it, you're like, oh, you've fallen into the archetype. And it's actually one of the funniest things. It's like I was talking to my housemate about it, and we were describing it as like retro-futurist psychology. But yeah, that's it. Talking about this book, I imagine that once I've finished all three books, I'm going to come back and do a nice goodbye to everyone. But for now, incredible. I will be thinking about this a lot moving forward, especially as someone who likes to write. This gives you so much to think about. So here we are. Cool blimey. Here at the end, we have read 3 of Daniel Greene's favourite books, and this has probably been the widest range of emotion I've felt. But the one thing I take away from this is that, to me, this shows that Daniel Greene is very much a reader who appreciates originality and appreciates diversity and having an idea that you hit well. You know, what we're seeing here is Murderbot is trying something very different and very original, and it does it very well. Flowers for Algernon has an incredible original writing style that I haven't seen, that was also executed incredibly. And Gunmetal Gods has a very innovative and interesting style of conflict, style of religion, and style of world building that we don't traditionally see. And I appreciate all of those things. And so that's what I take away from this, is that evidently Daniel Greene is well read across the board of fantasy, and that has allowed him to expand and appreciate like something like Gunmetal Gods. Look for something innovative and new. So if you have enjoyed, please do like, please do subscribe. Thank you very much, Daniel, again, for replying to me and letting me know these books. Fandabby-dozy. Hopefully I haven't offended anyone with my opinions on books. And as always, Have a nice rest of your day.